Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Draft Network. I'm Tamara Brown. That's Trevor Sikkema. We're ready to go through his latest mock draft. Trevor, when you take a look at this first 5 picks, pretty much everyone except for one team is in desperate need for a quarterback. Obviously, the San Francisco 49ers, they have a quarterback, but he's been up and down with his injuries. Why do you have them taking Justin Fields?
Yeah, so, to me, it's got to be Justin Fields. It can't be anybody else. You can make an argument for Trey Lance if you wanted to, and I'd be okay with that because when watching Trey Lance, I gave him a franchise quarterback ceiling. So if they were to trade it for Trey Lance, it makes sense. You could put him behind Jimmy Garoppolo, but for them to move 3 first-round picks to go up from 12 to 3, I've got to think they're going to get the higher ceiling player. To me, that's Justin Fields. And it's always been Justin Fields. There were rumblings when the trade went down. Oh, it's for Mac Jones. This is the kind of quarterback that Kyle Shanahan has had in the past. Look, we claim Kyle Shanahan as this genius, and he does not become an offensive genius by thinking that Mac Jones' archetype is the premium passer in the NFL. That's no slight on Mac Jones. I think that he's going to be a good starter in the NFL, but you don't use all of these picks to go up to number 3 and not pick the player with the highest ceiling. That's Justin Fields in every way, shape, and form, basically. So I think that it has to be him at number 3 overall. I know people like the storylines and I guess the fit of maybe Trey Lance sitting behind Garoppolo, like I mentioned earlier, but it just doesn't matter whether or not Justin Fields is starting in week 1 of 2021 or it's 2022. He's the right guy to pick. You moved all of that draft capital. You've got to go get the guy that's totally worth it there. And I always think that it's been Justin Fields here at number 3.
And what do you think that Justin Fields is going to be able to learn by taking, a year or 2 to sit behind Garoppolo?
I don't think it's going to be 2 years. I feel like it might be a year max, but clearly I think they're okay with Garoppolo. And it really just depends on where the 49ers believe they are within their winning window. Because if they think, hey, we still have the roster right now. They went to a Super Bowl not too long ago with Jimmy Garoppolo, but all of the rumblings after that kind of were like, all right, well, Jimmy's holding them back. They had some unfortunate injuries last year, which led to their record being what it was. And so you wonder if the 49ers truly believe, hey, we're still in that Super Bowl window. I really think that Justin Fields might start right away his rookie year. Maybe not week 1, but somewhere close. We could see it on a similar timeline to what we saw with Tua Tagovailoa last season. So, he could definitely stand to learn a thing or two when it comes to maybe sitting behind Garoppolo, but I don't think it's the progressions thing. That's way overblown to me. What I think is the biggest critique of his game is just when he sees the right read, and he often sees the right read. I want to make that very clear. Sometimes it just takes a little too long to get from boom, this is where I should throw it, to ball getting out of his hands. Just speeding up that process a little bit. But that's what Kyle Shanahan's all about. He's worked hands-on with QBs. He can definitely speed that process up for Justin Fields. And once he does, I think we're talking about a really, really high ceiling quarterback.
I'm really interested to see if this does end up being like a Tua situation, because being down in Miami, Florida, it was great to see when Tua finally got his time to start down here. It was amazing. But you brought up Trey Lance when you were talking about why Justin Fields over Trey Lance, but there is a team who is very interested in Trey Lance. And although he may not have the resume like Mac Jones, why do you see Trey Lance being so successful for the Denver Broncos?
So I've got him going to the Denver Broncos at number 6. And I think it's a good situation because when you look at the Broncos right now, there were a handful of different needs that you could have identified for them going into this offseason. They fixed a lot of those with what George Paton was able to do in his first year as general manager. So they did a great job navigating free agency, getting the right players in, and allowing them to truly pick best player available here in the first round. When you look at the roster, defense is pretty much set. Sure, they could upgrade a linebacker a little bit if they wanted to go that direction. They definitely could get a guy like Micah Parsons on their team, and I think that it would be good. But, you look at their offensive line, and if Juwan James is coming back to play right tackle, the wide receivers are young. They're getting Cortland Sutton back. They got 2 great tight ends. They've got Melvin Gordon at running back. I basically just named all the positions other than quarterback. And so they have Drew Lock, and opinions seem to be split on Drew Lock, how much people really believe in him. But I don't think they have the luxury. I don't think that Drew Lock has earned the luxury to just say, no, he's our guy. No competition here. I'm not so sure Denver is desperate enough to move on from Drew Lock that they would trade up from 9 to, say, number 4 with the Atlanta Falcons like we've seen before. But if Trey Lance is still on the board, say picks 6, 7, something like that, you pop up in front of Carolina because Carolina might be a threat, or a team trading up with Carolina could be a threat. That's when I think it makes sense. You don't got to give up multiple first-round picks in the future to go get Trey Lance. And if that's the case, bring Lance in, have him be QB competition for Drew Lock. Just find out who the better quarterback is, and whoever isn't, you can let him sit behind with depth, or you can trade him off for extra draft picks. I think that this is a win here. If Trey Lance gets just far enough, I think, back into the back end of the top 10, Denver's got to really be thinking about it if it's beyond number 4.
We've talked a lot about quarterbacks so far, and another great one, similar to Tua, is Justin Herbert. I remember there was a lot of chat between which one of them had a better season. And now we're looking at Justin Herbert, who could potentially have the chance to get a really great weapon to join him alongside him at the Chargers. What do you see with Waddle being picked by the Chargers in this upcoming draft?
Yeah, so this was not one that I thought that a pick that I was going to make. I have for a long time now, every time I've done mocks, I've said Chargers, offensive line. Like, I'm not deviating from this plan. This is what we're doing here. But when I got into this mock draft and I looked at a couple of picks that I thought were a little bit different, particularly with the Giants at 11 going Elijah Vera Tucker, and then the Eagles at 12 going JC Horn, that left Jalen Waddle on the board at number 13. And I thought this could really be a possibility. There's a chance that Jalen Waddle could make it to the Chargers at 13. And if he's there, I feel like the Chargers have done a good enough job in free agency, going to get Corey Linsley, getting Matt Filer, having Brian Bulaga already there. They've done a good enough job to where they could say, okay, offensive line's probably our priority in the first round. But if a player like Jalen Waddle drops to us and we get to put Jalen Waddle in an offense that's got Mike Williams as an X receiver on the outside and Keenan Allen as that basically do-it-all receiver who you could play anywhere on the field, that is an incredible wide receiver trio then for Justin Herbert to operate behind. Plus, picking early in the second round as well, they could go up and get an offensive tackle or an interior offensive lineman there with their second round pick as well. So this was kind of, I don't know if this is going to happen, but this pick in this mock draft was a little bit of a hat tip to the Chargers doing a really nice job in free agency, giving themselves best player available position, maybe more than we thought. So if a player like Waddle drops to him, could be a perfect pick.
Definitely can't pass it up, especially with what we've seen him do in Alabama's offense up and down the SEC. I mean, great player. You can't pass it up. So I definitely agree with you there. And we have another Jalen that's coming up on the horizon, but on the opposite side of the ball, Jalen Phillips, extremely great season for the Miami Hurricanes. But I mean, even his pro day, I would say his stock probably went up there. Running a 4.56 in the 40, I definitely was there and mouth was on the floor. Just for someone his size to be able to run that fast was pretty impressive. So he was definitely the talk of the town for Miami's pro day. Why do you have him going to the Browns?
Yeah, so this was the big shakeup, and Browns fans seem to not be very happy with me for this pick, and I'll explain why. But the Browns initially picking at number 26, here they were at number 16 selecting Jalen Phillips. And from Arizona's perspective, because the Cardinals were the team who was picking at 16, it makes sense. They only have 5 draft picks right now. Moving back into the back end of the first round makes sense because I had them getting a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick from Cleveland to go move up for them to get Phillips. And that makes sense for Carolina, for the Arizona Cardinals. And the reason why is because they can still get a cornerback that they would really need at the back end of the first round. And I have them getting Asante Samuel Jr., who we're not going to highlight later, but I just wanted to shout that out, that shows they can really make this happen. Caleb Farley could fall to them at 26. So all of that's possibility for Arizona. It makes sense for them to trade back. Cleveland trading up. This one does make sense for Cleveland because you look at this team and they're in a winning window. It's weird to say Cleveland Browns, they're in a winning window, but they're here for the first time in a long time. Go get aggressive. Go get the player that helps your team the most. If you got Myles Garrett on one side, Jalen Phillips on the other, Jalen Phillips had the best edge rush tape of any edge prospect in this class. If you ask me, it's just not close. I mean, what he can bring to the table as a guy who has that size, speed, athleticism, I mean, the strength that he comes with, how he can play from a 2-point stance, a 3-point stance. I mean, he's a do-it-all edge rusher from you. And as if Myles Garrett wasn't tough enough on one side, having Jalen Phillips on the other, That's incredible. But of course, there's the concussion history with Jaelan Phillips, right? It almost caused him to retire from football. And so that's certainly got to check out. You're not going to trade up for this kind of a player if you think that there's a risk that the concussions could be a real issue with him early on in his career. I know you never exactly know how it could happen, but that's something that you got to monitor. So if the background, the medicals, if everything kind of checks out with Jaelan Phillips, it makes sense for the Browns to get aggressive to move up. Maybe it's not for Phillips. Maybe it's for Jason Owe, the edge rusher out of Penn State. Maybe they really like Kwity Paye or Azeez Ojulari. This was more of me saying, hey, Cleveland, you're in a winning window. Do what you got to do to make your team as good as it can be the next 2 years. And I think that moving up to go get an edge rusher is the way you do it.
So I'm glad that you brought up his injury, because I was definitely going to follow up with that and ask what you thought and how that was going to affect where he went. And another player who is just now medically cleared to finally play again is CB Farley. I'm a big Virginia Tech fan. I was definitely sad to see him opt out last season, but obviously, totally understand with COVID and everything going on.
Right.
But over this weekend, I got the notification that he was cleared finally from his back injury. When you look at a player like that, why do you see him being such a big prospect still as we look at this first round?
Man, he's awesome. I mean, if he didn't have the back injuries, he'd be going top 10, I think. His ceiling is so high. When you get a player who has the length that he does, who moves as well as he does, and he's got that former wide receiver background, so he understands how to cover wide receivers because he's been in their shoes. And I think that if you look at the last 2 years of tape, I mean, he's still just learning the cornerback position. If that's the baseline I get for him in the NFL, that's a future star in the making. He moves in a way that most corners just don't move with his length. Now, the big issue is, of course, the back. There's a reason why we're not talking about him as a top 12 pick in this mock draft, and instead he's going number 23 overall to the New York Jets, right? And it makes sense for the Jets to take the swing on him because that's where the Jets are right now. They have a lot of draft picks over the next couple of years, and sure, you don't want to waste him. Of course, this is another situation with Jaelan Phillips where you got to do your background checking on this guy. You got to make sure that he's good to go, because even though CB Farley said that, his doctor said that he shouldn't miss time in this next season, 2 back surgeries before you play in the NFL. I mean, it's just not ideal, because the punishment gets even worse in the NFL as you're going up against these bigger, stronger guys. So at a baseline, CB Farley, phenomenal prospect. If he's healthy, this is a steal for the New York Jets at number 23 from a position that they desperately need.
And we're closing out the first round with Landon Dickerson, who has a great resume playing both in the ACC and the SEC. Why do you see him going to the Bucs?
This is a complete luxury pick. And the Buccaneers, like a lot of teams so far this offseason, have done a really nice job of bringing back what would have been the holes on their roster. And instead, they're not just bringing back their own guys, they're bringing back their entire Super Bowl team. I mean, it's basically everybody but Antonio Brown at this point. And so they bring almost everybody back. And you look at, well, what do you give the team that has everything? Well, I think that you give them a big X factor of a player, and you let them swing for the fences. And if it works out, it just continues to build on their winning window. Now, when you look at the Bucs situation, their offensive line's pretty much spoken for right now. They brought back all of their starting 5. They've got Donovan Smith at left tackle. They have Ali Marpet at left guard. They've got Ryan Jensen at center, Alex Kappa at right guard, and then Tristan Wirfs at right tackle. Landon Dickerson, he's played almost every single position along the offensive line, so he gives you that immediate backup versatility to where if any of those guys go down in his rookie season, Landon can step in and be a pillar for them, I think, right away. But then looking to the future a little bit, Alex Kappa's a free agent upcoming, as is Ryan Jensen. So maybe you don't bring back both of them. Maybe it's a little too expensive. Plug in Landon Dickerson right there. And so that's why I think this one makes a lot of sense for me. He's a player who, when healthy, every GM in the NFL is going to like. You got to make sure you're okay with the injury history, because out of the 5 seasons that he played in college football, 4 of them ended with season-ending injuries. But if you're okay with him so far, if you're okay with him moving forward, man, the Bucs could take a swing on a luxury guy like that.
I love how you said a team that has everything, because it's definitely very true. So I like
right.
It was just like, you're not wrong there, because when I look at what they have, it's like they don't have any major needs. As when we were looking at the first half of this first round, where like everyone is in desperate need of a quarterback. It's like the Bucs are like, we're not desperately really needing anything right now. But I like how you pointed out the free agency and looking ahead at that, and how a piece like this can really be helpful and help you not spend as much money trying to retain one of these guys. And now, as we look ahead to round 2 of this upcoming NFL draft, who are 2 players that you see in this mix that you'd like to highlight?
There are 2 team prospect connections here in the second round that I really enjoy. When I just was able to click their name for this team, it made me feel good about the connection. Tommy Togiai, he is the interior defensive lineman for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think that he is just straight up one of the best football players in this class. Now, he's not a big time pass rusher, because we sat here and we go, okay, well, this interior defensive line class is not great. There's not guys at the top that might, go in the top 5 like Quinnen Williams did a couple of years ago. People talk about Christian Barmore, but Tommy Togiai, he is just a fantastic football player. I don't know how much value he's going to give you necessarily on like those third down, those like long third down passing down situations, because that's part of his game that he's still developing. But the early down work, first and second down, I mean, he's going to be able to plug those holes, be the exact kind of nose tackle that you need. And when you look at the Dallas Cowboys interior defensive line, we at the Draft Network, we have IDL as, I believe, the second biggest need for the Dallas Cowboys behind cornerback. But it's not just any interior defensive lineman, because if you go in and you look at their depth chart, they have Neville Gallimore, they have Tristan Hill, and these are more of like quick 3-tech penetrating pass rushing interior defensive linemen. They need the workhorse. They need the anchor. They need the boulder guy in the middle. And so maybe this is a little bit early for Togiai to go, but he's the perfect player for the Dallas Cowboys. And so I really like this fit here. Then the other one, it's Elijah Moore going to the New England Patriots. It just feels like an easy team prospect pairing here because of the skill set. I mean, what Elijah Moore gives you is a slot receiver, how well he can separate. And I think that's the biggest part with the Patriots right now. They just need wide receivers who can separate and separate quickly. I mean, they have the downfield speed of Kendrick Bourne. They have Nelson Aguilar as well, but they need that inside guy. So go get a guy like Elijah Moore, let him play in the slot. At least then you have a really reliable, quick hit target that you can pair with those 2 tight ends that they signed in free agency.
How well do you think Elijah Moore could really help Cam Newton have a better year with the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that that's extremely important. I think the tight ends will certainly help Cam Newton as well, because he's very used to targeting that when he had Greg Olsen as his main man in Carolina. But anytime you've got a quick hitting, slot separating wide receiver, I think that's $1 million ticket for some quarterbacks. And we know that the Patriots are going to build their offense around that power running scheme, because that's what Cam does so well, because he is a threat with his legs. And the Patriots did that to a lot of success in 2020, but it wasn't enough. The team as a whole just was not enough there. And so they did a lot. They went out and got a lot of big names in free agency, and they certainly spent a lot of money, which is not something you see often from the Patriots, but they're doing their best to make that roster what it needs to be.
Trevor, looking at round 3, who are some available players who are really some great gems that teams can really take advantage of by snagging them in the 3rd round?
Yeah, it's fun doing these mock draft exercises going all the way through the 3rd round, because you realize that there's some names here that maybe you wanted to get off the board earlier, or you think like, I feel like this player should go a lot higher, but you go through the mock exercise and you just don't find a home for him. Creed Humphrey is one of those players, the interior offensive lineman from Oklahoma. He's a long starting center for him. He's so poised. He's got such a veteran mindset to the position. I have him going to the Las Vegas Raiders, who traded away Rodney Hudson, which was crazy. I mean, this is what I think one of the best centers in football, and they wanted to move on from him. So I'm not so sure that they spend early draft capital trying to revamp the offensive line just because they went and dismantled it themselves. I think that they'll probably have confidence in the guys that they have and can look elsewhere for their earlier picks. But in round 3, if you've got Creed Humphrey sitting on the board for you, I think that this is a home run pick for him. Gruden and Mayock are going to love his experience. They're going to love how the football mindset that he has. He's got that wrestling background where he wrestled throughout high school. And I love when offensive linemen have that wrestling background, because the core strength, the balance, it's just so natural to them when they're sitting there reaching and redirecting and just attacking guys' shoulders. I think Creed does that really, really well. And then the other guy that I will point out, Derek Barnes, the linebacker from Purdue. going to the Carolina Panthers specifically, because when I looked at the Panthers, linebacker definitely a need for them. They added Denzel Perryman, which is good. I think that they really needed him to be a Mike linebacker for them. And that brings up a question. Okay, what exactly do you want from Shaq Thompson? If they are comfortable playing Shaq Thompson as more of a Sam linebacker and they want to use Jeremy Chinn up towards the linebacker level, maybe it's kind of that will linebacker, speedy guy in space, they can totally do that. But Thompson's got speed of his own. So if they wanted to get beefier at linebacker, if they wanted to have more secondary flexibility with Jeremy Chinn, then maybe you pop Shaq Thompson over to more of a will linebacker spot and you get a guy like Derek Barnes who attacks the line of scrimmage really well. He's got some extra weight on him as a former edge rusher. You play him at Sam, and I think he is the ideal linebacker for exactly what Carolina needs to get more flexible with the players that they have. So those were another two guys that when I was able to click their name over to their team, that made me smile a bit.
I might be a little biased considering that you are in Charlotte, North Carolina as well, but I'll save that for another day.
That just means I know the situation well. So I'm pretty comfortable in putting Barnes there.
You know, I won't hold that against you. I won't hold that against you. Thank you so much, Trevor, for taking us through your mock draft 5.0.
Appreciate it, Tamara.
Stay tuned for more content as we prepare for the 2021 NFL Draft on the Draft Network.